like I was looking at a cartoon or um, a computer program or something. It was like I was looking through this little hole, and the hole is only about a quarter of an inch big, and I'm seeing this beautiful tree with a bright blue sky in the background, and it's right near a forest, and that was all I could see. Even if I turned the stone, I couldn't see more. But when I put the stone down and I brought it back up, I saw the exact same thing. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. I just thought, that's unusual. I thought maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me, because I'm always trying to rationalize what's going on around me, even though it sometimes can't be rationalized. And then I set the stone down, and I had the urge to look over, and I looked over just as this tiny little hand, and then the hand was like minuscule. I mean, I don't even know what to compare it to. It was like an insect hand. It was that small, and it reached out and just tapped my thumb, and I could feel it tap my thumb, and I've still got this tiny little mark there.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people, because these angels or angelic forces, or nature spirits as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
Whatever it is, it looks every bit like a fairy and very little like anything else.
But seriously, it kind of looks like a fairy. Just kind of doesn't look like your standard moth.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
But I wasn't going to make this video until I looked a little bit closer, and I realized after it lands behind my bench, it disappears. And it just vanishes. And in fact, I went outside to look, to try to find it, to see if it was trash, to see if it was a bug, to see if it was a leaf, like trying to figure out what it could be, and it was gone. It just vanished.
What's that? Yeah. What's what? Yeah, look. Right up there. Insect or something.
Is that an insect? Let's have a look. What is it?
I don't know. Oh my god!
Ugh.
What happens to people who cut down fairy films?
Did you see it? Huh? Did you see it?
Yeah, me and him saw it.
What'd you see?
It was like a big creature.
A big creature?
Yeah, like around 10 feet tall.
I'm not going to BS you guys. One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious. Did you see anything land in your backyard?
The paranormal is real. Is it? The paranormal is real.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. This evening we have a wonderful show in store. There's a guest coming on here in just a moment that I've been really excited to connect with. So tonight we're going to be joined by Tenny from Colorado. Tenny, how are you doing this evening?
Doing just fine. How you doing?
I'm really well, thank you for asking. And just right off the top, I do want to thank you personally for taking the time to coordinate with me. It can be intimidating to answer a message on a bulletin board asking to share your fairy stories. And so I just want to start by acknowledging that bravery and thanking you for having the courage to do that. Just at the top of the show, something I do like to remind my guests of, and for the listeners as well, just to set the tone for our experience together having this interview. The Fascinating Fae podcast is just a podcast. I'm a normal guy prior to my fairy sighting, and I'm still a normal guy. And I'm doing this to try to understand what I saw, and also to try to bring some comfort to other people listening that might have seen some stuff too. So you're doing the job, the heavy lifting here, so to speak, of being brave and sharing your experiences. But it is important to remind you there's no convincing anyone of anything. This is not about that. It's just a podcast here to collect stories and listen to people's voices in authenticity. So with that said, Tenny, what I'd like to ask you to do, with that warm introduction, hopefully you've got a lot of space and time here to bring us up to speed on some context. And we usually do like to ask that you sort of start from as early on into your story as necessary. Tell us kind of when your first experience with the Fae occurred. Give us as much context as you like. Tell us about yourself, the time of year, when this happened, and then, just if you would, just let us know about your experiences, please.
Okay. Well, I know my first experience that it was actually my first paranormal experience. When I was ages 2 to 4, I lived in Scotland. My dad was in the military, and he moved us around quite a bit. And so we were stationed in Scotland for 2 years. And of course, I don't know if you know about Scotland. In the winter, it gets dark really early. I mean, like noon, 12 noon. And then in the summer, it stays bright until almost midnight. So we had these heavy blackout curtains in our whole apartment. And when it would be time to go to bed, I usually slept in the bed with my mom. And my mom would bring me into bed, and we would sit there and talk for a little bit, just kind of, in complete darkness. And I remember one day I was sitting there, we were getting ready for bed, and I started to see these massive multicolored orbs just everywhere in the room. There must have been dozens of them, and they were all different sizes and colors, and looked a little bit like soap bubbles, but they were just hovering there. And so I used to see them like every single night that I would go to bed. And I remember one night I actually reached my arm out to one, because I thought for a long time that they were in my eyes, because I would ask my mom, "Do you see the bubble lights?" And she would tell me, "Yeah, I can see them, but I can only see them when I close my eyes." And I said, "Well, no, these are different," because I could see, it's hard to describe, but when you close your eyes, you can see these little bubbles that are kind of traveling along a vein. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm just closing my eyes as you're talking, and yes.
Okay.
And there's also the effect when you kind of press on your eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Please carry on. I'm really interested, and you're starting to remind me quite a bit of my first guest, so I don't want to interrupt.
Oh. Yeah, I was in my room, and we were talking about it, and she said she could only see it when she closed her eyes. And I told her, "Well, I can see it when I open my eyes." And the technique I had for doing this was I would calm myself way down, cover my eyes with my palms, and sort of just block out the light, not really press. But after I would open my eyes is when I would see all these colored orbs just everywhere, and they wouldn't move with my eye, so I knew they weren't in my eye. And remember one evening I reached out my hand towards there was a big orb right by me, and it's been about 10 inches diameter. And I reached out, and it hovered near me, and then it floated away, floated backwards. And I was so intrigued. I didn't know what to think about these things, because my mom couldn't see them, obviously. And so I thought, well, there must be something wrong with me. And I wound up thinking that for a very long time.
Okay, Tenny, wow. So my very first guest, Ron, is a gentleman in his 70s. And he began meditating later in his adult life, well into his 60s, as something to do. He was a municipal works staff member. So he worked for like a municipality doing municipal work stuff. And he was given basically early retirement from the municipality, and he began to meditate. And he describes, after gradually adding meditative practice to his life, a moment in which he is describing an almost identical set of visual contact with fairies as orbs, including his reaching of his finger out and watching the orb pull away, which made him super fascinated.
Oh, wow.
I know, it's remarkable that you're describing this as a young girl and Ron is describing it present day as an adult senior man. Truly fascinating. And he describes in his interview with me that they are in orb form frequently, and that there's additional forms they can take. So thank you so much for starting us off with that first encounter. You're off to a very strong start because you're describing what I have come to learn is real phenomena, and you're describing it very accurately. Not the least of which is the room totally full of orbs of all sizes, which also Ron talks about.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right? It's interesting.
That's fascinating. I've never heard of anybody else who had this experience.
One of the reasons I have started this show is for these moments, because like now Ron is going to listen to this and you're going to listen to Ron later. And that's going to be great for both of you. And then for me, it also was like, well, what I saw was visually impossible to describe. It's really interesting too. Also, Ron has a partner. He lives with his wife. And it's not that she doesn't see them. I don't think she experienced them quite like Ron does. And so there can be two people in the same space. And it's not that the fairies aren't there or the orbs aren't there. It's just that the perceptive capabilities of each person can differ quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And furthermore, I don't want to talk too much because I know you have some further equally and probably even more incredible stories to share with us here. But one of the interesting things too about what you're talking about is the sudden appearance of many, many of them all at once. And there's something to that. I think when a child is looking with uninterrupted quantum vision or uninterrupted ethereal vision or etheric vision through the veils, if you would, right? When young kids see and talk to the Fae, it's because their mind is still in a pure state. And with a guy like Ron, when he sees and talks to the Fae, it's because he's returned his mind to a pure state through meditation, through extensive meditation.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's my takeaway. That's my insight as to how the two things happen. I think some people are innocent and get a vision of it that way through their pureness. I think some people arrive at ecstatic moments of happiness and sort of hit that wavelength. And I think you can meditate your way there too. And I think all are valid ways of contacting the Fae. But yeah, so thank you. And thank you for letting me share my thoughts.
Oh, of course.
If you would be so kind, Tenny, and with thanks again for what you've just shared. And gosh, I could probably ask you some more questions about that towards the end, but I don't want to interrupt your storytelling here. If you would be so kind as to move forward in time now to your next encounter, that would be amazing.
So, much later, I think I was in my early 20s. I lived in a house that was a very strange house. It was near the river. And I'm pretty sure we were suffering from high EMFs or something, because not only did I have this experience, but I was hearing a man and woman arguing every night that weren't there, that kind of thing. And yeah, so one morning, I have to preface this, I'm sorry, by saying that I have tried to be spiritual my whole life, but I never got any real validation before. And so I was also tempering that with a lot of skepticism. I was really trying to believe. but nobody seemed like they were giving me a reason to, even though I was having these experiences over and over and over and over and over again. So in my 20s, I was starting to get back into my sort of religious practice, which is witchcraft, not Wicca, but witchcraft. And I kind of asked to communicate with the fairies again, because I thought that's what I was communicating with when I was 2 and 3. And I would get these little messages, and I could tell they weren't from me. But they were just little things, like little nice things, and that's how I knew they weren't my thoughts, because I was depressed at the time. I was clinically depressed at the time. And I started kind of talking to it in my head, and then one morning it graced me by showing up. I got out of bed, and something told me, look at your pillow. And I looked down at my pillow, and there, in 2 dimensions, dancing kind of like the motion that a zoetrope shows, was this tiny little person with wings, probably about, 2-3 inches tall, and they were just dancing like joyfully on my pillow, and they just did that for a few seconds, and then they vanished. And then another excuse me, sorry, another several years goes by, and this time I was going through an extreme period of high strangeness. I was witnessing synchronicities, and I mean, you name it, and I was going through it. And I found my old string of hagstones. Now, hagstones, they say that if you look through the hole in them, because hagstones are a stone from the river that has a natural hole in it. And they say that if you look through the hole, that you can see the fairy world. And so I found my old string of them. I used to find them 50 at a time by literally closing my eyes and feeling my way along the riverbed just with my arm outstretched. And then I would point down and go, there's one. And I could find them by droves that way. And I had put them away in a locked cabinet for a very long time. And when I found them again, I took one off, and I was peering through it. And peering through it, I could see that place. It was hard to see it, but I could see it was like a great big tree on the edge of a forest. And I set the stone down next to my hand, and a few seconds later I saw this little boop, I saw a little tiny hand pop out of the circle in the stone and touch my thumb, and to this day there's a tiny little marking where he touched me.
This is some incredible, detail-rich contact storytelling with the Fae. Tenny, thank you so much for taking myself and the audience on this journey with you.
Oh, of course.
There's a few things you have said which I immediately need to seize upon in terms of further questions, and seize upon in a positive way. I really want to preface that. Wow. Okay, let me collect my thoughts. I'm going to reference my first guest as well as many other guests that I have spoken to when I say that you are not the first person to talk about the two-dimensional aspect. When you say there's this little character in 2D, they are so thin and so two-dimensional that it is difficult to actually describe that you're seeing it.
Yeah.
Because it defies what you're used to looking at. Now, I've already just described how difficult it is to talk about. So my question might seem silly, but the question I would like to ask is, to the best of your ability, can you add as much detail as possible about how this thing looked two-dimensional? Anything about its appearance really is great here, but starting with that two-dimensional aspect, please.
Okay, well, it looked like a projection, almost like a projection of something on my pillow. It was that two-dimensional, and yet it wasn't following the contours of the pillow. It was a projection or a piece of paper that was just flipping through a flip book, but it was showing up on my pillow. And he was male, he was blue, and he was not dressed in very much, but he was beautiful.
When I saw mine, it was purple. And Ron, when he saw his first, it was blue as well. And so blues and purples seem to be a hue that they can embody. Also, Ron described it like looking at a cartoon projected on the wall. And the way you just described it, like a projection on your pillow, is so eerily similar. What are the chances of that?
Wow.
When I saw mine, I don't like to talk about my own fairy encounter too much during people's interviews, but I have to at this moment. When I saw mine, it looked to me like it was two-dimensional as well. Mine was like a punch. I've described it previously, Tenny. Like it looked like someone had punched out from a piece of black paper a shape of a fairy, wings and all, like a hole punch. And that there was a bright light behind this black paper, a bright purple light, like a plasma light. And what I was looking at face on was this flat, ultra flat, two-dimensional cutout from reality itself, shining this bright, intense light. Fairy encounters are varied in their visual components, but one thing that is remarkably similar is this two-dimensional. I have a guest from New Zealand who saw a very full-sized one, like the size of a dog or a human toddler. And he was describing it also having like paper mache limbs, like so thin. So interesting. When you were talking about the dancing motion, I think you were referring to a type of amoeba or a type of single-celled animal. Is that correct?
I don't think I did.
Oh, what you said it was dancing like something.
Oh, no, I just said it was dancing so joyfully.
So joyfully. I see. I think it was a trick of the audio, and I might have heard a word that reminded me of something that would be wriggling back and forth.
Like a flagellum, huh?
That's maybe, I think, what I was sort of thinking of when I misheard it. So I'm glad that I asked to clarify. So it was joyful. Could you talk about it being like, what was it doing that made you think it was happy, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I could see facial features, and he was smiling. He was smiling, and he had his eyes closed, and he had his head thrown back, and he was just sort of spinning, but not literally spinning. Yeah, I could see sort of the projection of him. He was spinning. He was spinning, and he was mostly blue, with some, what was it? Some purples.
What type of wings would you say that it had? If you were to try to describe it like an animal or other type of thing, what type of wings would you say were there?
Sort of like dragonfly wings is how I would describe it.
Yeah, mine was like that too, with one kind of on a 45 below, cocked and shorter, and one bigger and up, and oriented at the back of the shoulder blades.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And also super thin. The wings are super thin.
Exactly. They were super thin. They were see-through. They were not exactly shaped the same way that a dragonfly's would be, but they were more vertical, like a very thin butterfly wing. They looked like they were just see-through, just gossamer, you know?
Yeah, you got it. It's up and down like a butterfly wing, but it's gossamer like a dragonfly wing, and it's neither of the two, but it's a combo of the two.
Right.
You've seen a real fairy. For sure you have. I can tell you that for sure. That's a real fairy. That's what they look like. They're like 2D. I know. Could you tell me about the face at all? I know it's hard to describe a face, especially a face of a fairy, but you have been in an incredible position. You're one of the very few lucky people on earth to really see these things. And so anything that you can offer, I know we've already talked and I've asked you for details 5 times already. So I'm so sorry, Tenny. I'm just fascinated. If you could tell me anything about the face, I'd love it if you could. Thank you so much.
I don't mind at all. I'm happy to share. Yeah, his face was, he had like what they call a pixie cut, where it was like just kind of jagged short hair, and he was so handsome. He was like ageless. You couldn't tell what age he would be, and he was sort of boyish but sort of adult looking too, if that makes sense. It was like he just looked like he didn't have an age, and he had his eyes closed and he just looked so happy. And see, that's about all I can remember about it, though.
That's so much detail. Thank you so much for, reaching into your mind's eye and to your memory to pull up all that detail. I'd like to add some thoughts, and maybe it'll be nice for you to hear some of these. When someone is talking to me who's visually seen a fairy for real, and by the way, there's so many questions that I'm yet to get to about these stones. So we'll just stick on the fairy dancing on your pillow for a moment more, since it in and of itself is so fascinating. When people really see one, there's like a list of things that I'm starting to collect, including cross-referencing to my own sighting, that allows me to identify someone who's actually seen a fairy. And the 2-dimensional thing is like a dead giveaway. I mean, that's a detail that doesn't really show up when you're reading fairy tale stories and when you're reading folklore. Do you know what I mean? Like if you go now online and you go to Wikipedia or anything like that, the only hint that a fairy is 2-dimensional anywhere is in Wikipedia when it talks about the Cottingley Fairies photos, and specifically photo number 5, which there was never a cutout that they could reference the girls traced for photo number 5. And in photo number 5, there's these paper thin fairies that are very similar to what Ron's described, what you've described, and what other people that have seen them have described. And the reason for that was kind of both my first guest, Ron, a subsequent guest named Isha Patel, who is sort of like an intergalactic coach, mentor, guru type of person, someone who's leading a group of people on the pursuit of that sort of stuff. Both of these people and others have told me that the reason they look so flat is as follows. They are kind of projecting themselves into our reality as a force of their mind. And when we see them, they're kind of coming from a higher dimension down into our lower dimension. And the easiest way for them to kind of ingress or to make themselves pop up is as this ultra thin 2-dimensional shape, basically like a gossamer projection, like you talked about it. Because there's no conjuring up of the mind of the girth, of the weight. It's not like a fleshy water carrying organism. It's a projection into reality that is really there, but is a byproduct of them consciously projecting themselves into a visual existence of sorts. And that's why they're so strange to look at, because you're seeing it, but what you're seeing is not normal visual stimulation. It's a type of vision of something that is happening at a deeper level, I guess, it is really happening in front of your eyes. Your eyes are perceiving that quantum thing in front of you, but you're looking at a quantum thing, so it's just so strange.
Right. It's like when you see a pyramid, but you see it from above, and you're looking at it from a different angle. It looks like a triangle.
Exactly. Some people say it's like a hologram sticker on a wall. If you turn your head and look at it at certain angles, you can tell it's got some depth because it's a hologram sticker. But if you were to try to look at that sticker right on the wall with your eye right next to the wall, you can barely see the sticker because it's so thin. It's just stuck on the wall.
Yeah.
And there's something, they do something kind of like that. And when you said that it was projected, but it wasn't following the contours of your pillow, that's a really excellent descriptive detail. I would like to thank you for that, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
That's the deal sealer for me as the listener, doing my job of objectively trying to bring true fairy encounters to this show. So you've done a huge service to this conversation, and you've had this like set of experiences which are very powerful. Now, I had not previously heard this about river stones with holes in them. I am looking out my window right now at a raging river. I'm fortunate enough my condo overlooks a waterfall here in British Columbia. And I can't wait to hang up and go see if I can find one of these stones. But could you maybe please just back up a little bit, Tenny, and let me know a little bit more about how these stones are functioning from folklore. And then if you could, I would like to ask you some questions about the hand that you saw come through and some more details about what you saw through the stone. But if we could just start about the stones a little bit more, that's fascinating, and you seem to have some understanding there.
Yeah, so I know a little bit about hagstones. I know that witches used them ages ago. I know that they're usually just normal looking stones that are kind of flat, that have a hole bored in it from the water. And I know that they say that when you hold the hagstone up, that you can either see the fairy realm or you can see the truth. There's a few items in folklore about that. But as far as that goes, that's about all I know about them. And then, of course, my experience. It's not my only experience.
Okay, thanks for letting me know what you do know about hagstones. I'm definitely learning as I go, so any bit of knowledge I get on subject matter that I'm not previously familiar with is like really valuable. How big approximately is this hagstone that you are talking about during this incident with the reach through?
Oh, it's about 2 inches tall and about 2.5 inches wide, and then it's very thin. It's only about 1/4 of an inch thick.
Now, these were locked away, and so you retrieve them after a long period of them being locked away. Why was it that they were locked away? Is that okay to ask?
Well, I don't really know. I just kind of, I was going to say this sounds silly, but it doesn't actually here. I sort of gave them to them. I gave these stones to the fairies. Like I gave them back to them, put them on a string, and put them in a cabinet that I keep locked.
It doesn't sound silly here at all. I'm starting to understand that the existence of fairies is a real phenomena, which could be, I think, understood, justified, and measured with quantum physics as a scientific principle underpinning that investigation. But I also think that folklore and magical practices or ritual practices, or even just like folklore like you're talking about hagstones and your intuition to return them to the fairies, follows a pattern of language that predates modern science but is talking about the same phenomena. And so I'm starting to think of folklore more as like a owner's manual, like a technical owner's manual, to the phenomena of living in a universe, in a world that coexists with fairies. So like fairies are here, and so folklore around these things is not just storytelling anymore to me. I'm starting to look at it more like instruction manuals written in another time and another language from a position of context different from today. And so I may be quite correct that hagstones do have a function like a piece of tech that lets you look through the veil. And so I'm very accepting of that, and I'm for that reason accepting of why you had them locked away, and I was just curious genuinely. Before I move on, I said I was going to tell you all these things about your guy dancing on the pillow that stood out, and I forgot one of them. You said at one point you just had this urge to look down at your pillow. Something made you want to look down at your pillow. That's also characteristic of fairy sightings, is a slightly unusual urge to do something slightly unusual. And I had a firefighter from Montana tell me very recently, I was sort of looking at where things were already burnt because I was just sitting there tired looking at that area. And I just had this urge to look over my left-hand shoulder. And he did, and he subsequently saw something incredible. But no real reason to do that. He just knew he had to look over his left-hand shoulder all of a sudden. reminds me so much of what you say about looking down at your pillow. So, not to bounce around too much, but I did want to make sure that thought was at least loosely connected to the story about the fairy on your pillow. So when you were looking through these hagstones, Tenny, if I could continue to ask you some questions, I would really appreciate it. I'd really appreciate your time so far and all this question answering. I'll just have a few more questions about the stone experience, and we'll wrap it up pretty quickly after that, out of respect for your time and the audience's time. But while I still do have you, so it's about a couple of inches, so I understand. So you can pretty much put your eye right up to it, is what I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah, so like your eye is going to pretty much match the size of the hole or close to it, sounds like. Tell me about what you were seeing when you looked through. You said a large tree. Is there any details you can remember about color of what you were seeing? Any qualities of what you were visually experiencing that stood out would be lovely if you could share that with us.
Just that it didn't look real. It's very hard to describe this part, but it was almost like I was looking at a cartoon or a computer program or something. It was like I was looking through this little hole, and the hole is only about a quarter of an inch big, and I'm seeing this beautiful tree with a bright blue sky in the background, and it's right near a forest, and that was all I could see. Even if I turned the stone, I couldn't see more. But when I put the stone down and I brought it back up, I saw the exact same thing. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. I just thought, that's unusual. I thought maybe my eyes are playing tricks on me, because I'm always trying to rationalize what's going on around me, even though it sometimes can't be rationalized. And then I set the stone down, and I had the urge to look over, and I looked over just as this tiny little hand, and then the hand was like minuscule. I mean, I don't even know what to compare it to. It was like an insect hand. It was that small, and it reached out and just tapped my thumb, and I could feel it tap my thumb, and I've still got this tiny little mark there.
Amazing. One of the questions I'll ask, and it's okay if you don't want to for reasons of privacy. Here on Fascinating Fae, we don't reveal identity, but if you can just send me a totally disjointed picture of that little mark on your thumb, I'll put it up as a little liner note.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because I'm sure everyone would be fascinated to see the mark left over after a fairy touched a person. And so that's an incredible thing, that it can actually reach through the stone as well as letting you see through it. I also really appreciate a couple things that you've said here. One is that you saw the same thing when you looked through it a second time. Fascinating detail. And as well, I appreciate that you talk about how you want to discredit first or rationalize first. I'm the same way. I have to walk a super fine line on this show between affirming where I know to affirm. Yeah, you did see that. That's what other people talk about. That's what I saw. And, suspending my disbelief where I'm not sure. But you've added so much credibility to what you have now just told us about this hand reaching through the stone by telling such detailed, correct accounts of your previous experiences that there's no way I cannot believe you as well. So this is fascinating. So one question that comes to mind, like this really tiny hand, when it was moving through, you must have been quite astonished to see it. Was there any type of emotional feeling or any feeling you can remember as you watched this hand come out of that little rock?
Just mild surprise, pretty big surprise. Because I wasn't expecting anything to pop out of it, and I even picked it up to see if it was something on the other side, and there was nothing on the other side.
And so after it touched you, did it sort of immediately pull back into the stone?
Oh, yes.
It reads like, if I'm reading this as just a story on the page, like it just wanted you to know that, yeah, you were looking through that stone, and just a little boop. Like I have a neighbor's dog who comes around to my patio, and I open the door and the dog just sits there, until I give it one little boop on the nose. It's the cutest thing. Yeah. I'll say, "Do you want your boops?" And it'll wag its tail patiently until I give it a little boop. Just want it to let me know that, it knows I'm there and I know it's there. And it's the funniest thing, and it sounds a lot like that. Like that fairy just wanted you to know, like for sure, like hi there, just a little touch.
Yeah.
Could have also been activating your fairy DNA, as one
Yeah.
guest recently just told me. I do have an incredible story forthcoming about a guest who was abducted by fairies, taken underground, and had his fairy DNA activated, something that was his birthright. It's a super interesting story. A gentleman born with a cleft palate, which is in folklore associated with the fae. Anyway, you're sort of the second contactee who's had like a contact uninitiated through meditation. Like this thing reached through the stone unexpectedly and touched you. And I do think that is a very special experience to have had. And for that reason, I cannot thank you enough, truly, for sharing all of these experiences. I'll just wrap up with a few questions about the Hagstone touch, and then I'll move forward with kind of some wrap-up questions for you, if that's okay with you, Tenny.
Okay.
Thank you. So after this happened, what did you do with the stones next, I guess is really just what I wanted to ask.
I put them back on the string, and I put them back in the locked cabinet.
And they're there to this day, hey?
Yes.
Fascinating. Yeah, when you were talking about how you were giving it to them, I was sort of getting some intuitions coming forward around that moment in the conversation, and I kind of felt like if they are in fact a way to get through to that other side visually, or as you've just demonstrated, perhaps even as a method of contacting the other side physically, protecting them away in a locked place where they can't be used and abused and found by people who don't know what they've got is a gesture of respect and deference to the fae. It's sort of saying, I know that these things could fall into the wrong hands and they probably stress you out that they exist, so I'm going to take them all and put them here safe. And I think that sounds to me like an act of reverence, respect, and deference to the fae. I don't know if that's where you were coming from or where you were trying to go with that, but I take that way, and I appreciate people who, through their actions, are building fairy gardens or leaving offerings or otherwise engaging in actions like that. And so I appreciate it. It does not sound silly whatsoever. In fact, it sounds quite advanced on a lot of levels, if I'm honest, Tenny.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was there any type of color or any details around this little hand, in addition to it just being really small, that come to mind? Would be my final question, and then we'll move on from sort of my detailed questions after that.
It was a little cream colored hand. There wasn't, it almost looked like, it was kind of clawed a little bit, not clawed as in it had claws. It was curled up, like one would make a fist, but not tight. And as it popped through, it kind of touched me with 2 fingers.
Cool. I'm really glad I asked for that again, because the 2 fingers is a new detail. Cool. That's really cool. I feel like there's something more going on there than just a little touch. And that dot lingering with you suggests something more going on there as well. What, I don't know, but I just feel there's something more going on there.
Can I mention something?
Oh, please. Please do.
This may be off topic, but actually ever since they touched me, I discovered my ability to call UFOs, whatever they are, to call on them when I'm outside. I can actually summon them, I suppose.
Let's talk a little bit about that. And so, I mean, gosh, this isn't unrelated at all. The logo for this podcast has a UFO beaming up a Sasquatch with a bunch of fairies dancing around him.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's cool.
Yeah, and orbs for that matter too. And I would even go so far as to say the angelic. There's so many things that are associated with fairies because there is an interdimensional ecosystem surrounding us, I'm starting to understand.
Yes.
And we are kind of the low dudes on the totem pole in terms of our spiritual evolution and capacity for perception. So we get little glimpses and we're just wandering around like the evolved primates that we are, like, what the heck does that mean? What was that? I don't know. And probably our surrounding, brothers and sisters of the interdimensional kind are laughing at us from time to time as we walk around perplexed. This does not in any way actually sound disconnected, because the guest I was referring to had an alien abduction / fairy abduction. Talks about his encounter starting with an abduction from mantids in a UFO who took him down to the Fae. Here you are. You're the next guest I talk to after I talk to that guest I'm referring to. Funny enough, this keeps happening. And here you are talking about the Fae touching you with 2 fingers and now it activating your ability to call UFOs. It's not that unrelated at all, in my opinion, Tenny. Can you talk to me about that? Is that the CE5 technique of calling? Is that anywhere close to what you're referring to as an ability that was activated?
Yeah, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I hate interrupting the guests. It's my least favorite thing to have done. I was just going to ask you to tell me as much as you can about how contact works for yourself, please.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't actually read the CE5 thing about how you do that, but all I know is that I go outside, usually holding a high vibrational crystal like an celestial quartz, and I just kind of concentrate on them coming. So maybe it is similar. I don't know.
I have no idea, and I mean, I really don't even know what fairies are still. I sound sometimes like I do. That's not true. I sound like a guy who gets to listen to people who have really seen them over and over again. It doesn't mean I have any idea what the heck they are. I just can recognize patterns from my, let's call it, privileged position as a guy who gets to hear stories all the time. Because not a lot of people are sitting around collecting real fairy stories, I don't think. Joe Hickey Hall, who's got a great podcast, the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, would appear to pretty much be the only other person doing this. Wow. And when she has guests, I've yet to hear a guest talk about a 2-dimensional fairy on her show. Interestingly enough, she tends to have people with fairy encounters that are much more, I would say, like folkloric, in the sense of like they're much more flesh and blood type of encounters, with less of a quantum physics-y interdimensional tinge. But going back to what you're saying about calling the UFOs, may I ask, and again, all the questions I ask ever on this show, never any are meant to be challenging. They're curious, genuine, curious questions, basically. What have you been able to call in? What type of positive response have you had from this technique? I'm just curious if you would please share some of that, if that's okay.
Okay. I do have some video of one of them that I called on. The first one that I summoned, it was the weirdest experience, because at first I was calling it when we were in the car and my mom was driving. I'm sitting next to her. And this little flashing light, little tiny flashing light, started flashing really brightly, just on and off. And then a few minutes later, we were pulling into park at a bank, and this enormous shadow of a bird flew over the car. So it was so big that we ducked, and we kind of looked through the back window to see where it went and what it was, and there was nothing there. And one of the clouds that I took a picture of that day has a striking resemblance to a swooping bird. And I have a picture of that bright light that we saw flashing too.
I would love any type of photos that you feel comfortable sharing, as well as any videos that you feel sharing. And it's so weird talking to you, because I talked with this gentleman named Aaron. Gosh, you're tying together details from 8 or 9 interviews in this one interview.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Aaron was in Okefenokee Park in Indiana, and him and his partner were, among other things, confronted by a huge disembodied shadow of a huge bird overhead. Disembodied meaning they looked and looked and looked and could not find what possibly had made this shadow.
Wow.
and both of them were like, this was so big and it was winged and it wasn't a plane. And it was like, so let's add, for the listeners who are starting a spreadsheet of all the fascinating Fae details that come up, let's add disembodied shadows to one of the spreadsheet boxes, please. Disembodied bird shadows. Really cool. Really cool. Well, Tenny, you know, I like to try to keep the episodes to around an hour or so, just out of respect for everyone's time. I could probably ask you questions all day, if I'm honest. But, you know, we'll never be able to do that in one show. So I really appreciate you stringing together these 3 fairy encounters and then this really interesting thought to leave on about activating your ability to call in craft and some subsequent craft that you've had success calling in. I think that there's something very someone said to me, it gets weird fast when you try to understand it, and it sure does, because, you know, we're branching out beyond just fairies pretty quickly here, and I'm not surprised, because if one is true, then other things that are energy beings or fall into the classification of interdimensionals are also very likely to be true as well. And with that said, which is actually a pretty decent place to segue, I'm just going to share some primers before I ask this last question. So I ask this question to every guest. It's not a question I'm just asking you. I don't think there's a correct answer, and I don't think there's a wrong answer, because there is nobody with a fairy in a jar sitting at home studying it, hopefully, and I don't think a jar would hold them anyway. So, you know, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer at all. This is just about your thoughts and opinions getting a chance to be shared. And so my question for you, Tenny, if you would be so kind as to answer, is what do you think that fairies are?
Oh goodness. I'm of the mind that fairies and aliens and angels and UFOs, that it's all tied in as well. I've had so many experiences throughout my life, and I can't help but see common threads running through them, you know? And I mean, I've witnessed a Bigfoot encounter. I've been abducted too. I've been propositioned to go on an elevator to hell. That was a weird one. I'll tell you that sometime. But yeah, I can't help but see common threads running through them. And so I really think that if we find one definitively, we're going to find all of this.
I'm actually with you so much that it kind of freaks me out that I'm starting to think this way, because I'm a very rational person with previous success in business and a lot of experience with administrative and government stuff. And so, you know, I have my head on my shoulders. But with that said, having your head on your shoulders will very quickly grow to include the veracity of understanding around the subject matter in a way identical to how you've just framed it. And for that reason, I really appreciate those thoughts, and I think they're extremely valid and very correct. So Tenny, what we're going to do here next is basically just move to let you go. Again, just out of respect for your time, but before I do that, I kind of make a point of saying we're going to move to let you go specifically because I think, like to have you back at a certain point. I'm definitely going to be bringing some other guests back, and we can talk Bigfoot, we can talk abduction, when a separate episode, you know, can have those focuses and allow you to do the same thing you've done here, which is to have some time and space to get into those details without trying to cram all the stories together into one. So thanks for those teasers about some things that we may be able to speak with you again. You've been a fantastic guest here on the show. You've been really generous with your time, with me and with the audience listening. So with that said, a big thanks to Tenny tonight for coming on the Fascinating Fae Show. A brief reminder to the audience listening, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, just shoot me an email. The email address is encounters@fascinatingfae.com. Also, if you go to the fascinatingfae.com website, there will be things there for you, like photos of Tenny's thumb, some pictures and videos that she and other guests have shared that help share some details visually about their experiences. There's nothing for sale. This is a passion project that I have created because of my own fairy experience. And that's more than enough for me, just to know that you guys are checking it out and having a listen. So Tenny, with all of that housekeeping done, thanks for your patience there as I do a little housekeeping for my show. I like to hand the final word over to my guests, and it can really just be a goodbye or anything you feel like talking about or saying. A lot of people do listen to this show, and that audience is growing all the time. And, I feel like it's a matter of respect and a way to say thank you to the guests for their time. So, with that big thanks extended on behalf of all of our human and non-human listeners listening to Fascinating Fae, I'm just going to leave the mic open for you tonight here, Tenny. It's all yours.
I guess I'd just like to say thank you for having me, and I would be more than happy to come back.
After dark, when the light has left us, we'll be on the move tonight. Through the park, past the frozen people, we leave behind these city lights. And as the sun comes up this hill, you don't know what you've been missing. After the daylight comes around, you do what you will, play your part and learn and listen, up until the day that you are found, when your daylight comes around. Night, we crossed the open plains and reached the mountains by the day. Into the sea, we meet our ships